Today on I'll Have You Know.
Even when you graduate 10, 15 years down the road, you pick up the phone or you send an email to somebody who you've been at Rice with, regardless of what class, what year, they're going to respond to you. That is a sacred part of Rice and keeps us all together.
Welcome into I'll Have You Know. I'm your host, David Druglever. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Devina Bhojwani. Devina is the president and co-owner of Idea Lab Kids. She is also the Rice Business Class of 2006 in the full-time program and is also a Jones School board member and involved with the International Student Association. So first off, Devina, great to have you today and welcome in.
David, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm just refilling up my cup of coffee here because I think we have a lot to unpack. It's been many moons since you've completed the program since 2006, so there's a lot here. And as many folks, they come out of Rice, maybe they were in oil and gas or they go into oil and gas or the energy sector. And I know that was part of your background, and now you're in a completely different space. So could you give us a little harbor cruise of your background and how you got to the point where you're focused on a franchise such as Idea Lab Kids?
Sure, definitely. I like how you said, you know, with Rice and Houston, we all end up somehow being connected to oil and gas. So that
Mhm.
was very true of my journey. I've worked in the oil and gas sector for about 10 years. After Rice, I went to Transocean and I was in their corporate planning and forecasting group. Was, living my dream job in a way after our MBAs and having a great time. And then in 2009, I had my first child, and that's what made me kind of take a pause in my career and figure out what I really wanted to do next. And education is something that had always been very close to my heart, education and entrepreneurship. And 4 years after graduating from Rice is when I realized that the benefit of Al Napier's new enterprise class, it still had a lot of great memories, and that's what made me jump into business ownership. So me and my husband purchased a couple Gymboree play and music centers. It's a franchise and an indoor playscape for children. My own child took her first steps at that facility, and that started us off on a completely different journey. This was about a decade ago, and, it was a hard decision to pivot from the cushy corporate job because you had this consistent salary that came to you on a bi-monthly basis. And then you had to kind of give that up and take the risk of entrepreneurship. But, I will tell you, David, that that's something that I have never looked back on and do not regret to this day. It's opened up so many different opportunities. I ran and operated my Gymboree centers for 8 years and grew my four centers to be the top performing in the nation. Exited in late 2018 to 19. And in the meanwhile, I had also become an investor in Idea Lab franchise, which is a franchise program here in Houston. It's a STEM based after school franchise. And what started off as a passive investment turned into a more full time gig for me. I stepped in about a year ago to be the president here at our corporate offices in Houston.
That is a lot. Making a couple notes here. And so, well, I appreciate that. And just to get a little bit, maybe one more level deeper on that, was it the focus on family that brought you into this focus on education? Was it the social circle or tribe that you're in? I mean, there are many things that you could have done. So, what brought you to want to enter into entrepreneurship and really in the education space?
I'll take this a step back. Me and my husband grew up in Dubai in the Middle East, and what brought us to Houston was actually Rice University. He was a full time class of 2004, and then I went right after him. So we were two back to back MBAs. And I think when I look back at my journey, what I realize is education's always been a top priority for me. We picked up our lives and moved ourselves all the way from Dubai to Houston for Rice, and that's made me realize how much emphasis I lay on good education. And there were three things. One was the flexibility that I was looking for myself as a working mom. We had two high strung careers in my household. And I realized fairly quickly, being in oil and gas, that I could work the 80 hours a week. I didn't mind that, but I needed it to be on my own terms. So that was one primary reason, was the flexibility. Secondly was, we used to take her to this program when she was a baby, and she started crawling there, taking her first steps there, like I mentioned. And I realized that it was it was like a little happy place. Everybody that came there, this was their 1 hour that they got to spend with their baby. And the funny thing was that she had an identity there, even though she was only 6 months old. We walked in one day, and her teacher says, "Hi, Anya." I said, "Wow, this is my little 6 month old," and they all know her here, even though she just attends once a week. So that's what really made me pick up the phone and call the corporate offices in California and say, "I love this program. Can I open one of these centers for myself?" And that led into a discussion of, well, the Houston market's tapped out. We've been around for 40 years, but you can definitely buy a couple centers which are up for resale. So that led into the decision of buying those three or four centers that I started with. And lastly, I think also the entrepreneurship that you mentioned, that's something that we've grown up around. My dad is an entrepreneur. My in-laws have their own businesses in Dubai. So I think somewhere deep down we always knew that we wanted to venture into that space. You do have to be willing to take a huge amount of risk, and I think that risk appetite is, if you've grown up around it, that's something that comes very easy.
That's an interesting call out that that's already part of your family. So that sort of risk taking energy was already there. Perhaps on Idea Lab Kids, just to focus on that. And you had mentioned STEM based after school programs. And just, if you could do maybe a compare contrast between Gymboree and then Idea Lab Kids, just so we can have a little bit of context between those two.
Sure, absolutely. So Gymboree is a program that focuses on the 0 to 5 year age range, and focuses more on fine and gross motor skills. And with Idea Lab, the program is a STEM based after school. Like I mentioned, it's the age ranges are 5 to 14, and primarily the programs are around coding, drone flying, robotics, engineering, art. We have a culinary art section. So really, all of these programs are introduced to kids at a younger age. Some of the schools in different states do not really have STEM education included in the public school system. So the advantage of STEM is you introduce these children to these concepts early in life, and you might see a spark in coding. There might be a child that's interested in coding. So that's really the stark difference between the two programs, is taking the children through the elementary and middle school years versus the early child education.
Yeah, yeah. Needless to say, flying drones or was not part of my public school education. So maybe I need a little bit of Idea Lab Kids when I was 5 to 14. That is amazing. I can only imagine the capabilities, and especially with data sciences you had mentioned. That's such a big one, and this tees them up for that so much earlier. My goodness. So fascinating. And so let's focus on sort of the challenges, or maybe even pleasures of running a franchise like this one and this STEM based program. Obviously, we'll talk about COVID impacts in a bit, but when you made the shift to Idea Lab Kids, what are some of the things that you have found the most challenging, and sort of have learned along the way as you've been growing Idea Lab Kids?
So one thing that I brought to the table when I joined Idea Lab was that I'd been a franchisee myself, and I think having lived in those shoes, having been a business owner operator myself, I kind of could really relate to my franchisees. I think the biggest challenge right at the beginning for me was really dividing my time to be internally focused on our management team here within the Idea Lab headquarters, and then to have a balance between being externally focused on our customers. I mentioned that because our customers are not just our franchisees, but our end customer, who are these children who take these classes. Even though they don't come into a facility that I own and operate and I teach, our offices or our headquarters are responsible for the lesson plans or the customer experience at that facility. So at the end of the day, that end customer having making sure that they are having the best experience as we envisioned through the program is something that has been different for me, because when I was a franchisee, I could see and touch that customer directly, give out customer surveys, get more direct feedback. Now pivoting to with my corporate hat, that's there's another level or layer in between them and I. But it is something that I'm learning to react differently towards, and to divide my time between being internally and externally focused.
Wow, there's a lot there. My goodness, I have
Hmm.
3 or 4 questions just based on that. And do you then focus on helping the franchise, and like what does that look like, and how much ownership happens? Because I'm thinking of on one side of the spectrum, from management, you're saying, okay, well, here's the program, here are the support structures we're going to give you, and then it's on you to perform, get customers, and focus on that customer experience. On the other side of the spectrum, you get involved in the franchise in the day to day, and it's more of a locking arms type of motion. So where in the spectrum does each of those pieces lie between the management and the franchisees?
One thing we tell all our prospect franchisees when they come in for discovery day is you are going to wear multiple hats, from operations to marketing to programming. You're the all and end all. Even though you might get a director or a manager who might help you run your facility, really all of these facets of the business fall under the owner. Now, taking it to the next level, what the corporate offices do at any franchise is they will give you an operations manual, they'll give you a marketing calendar, most likely for the entire year. So your tools and your assets are laid out and given to you. But at the end of the day, then it comes really back to you, David, as a franchisee, to have the motivation and desire to really run that program at the best level. And we see this across any franchise system, right? I saw this at Gymboree when my centers grew to the top performing locations. People used to come and ask me, what are you doing differently that we could do in our markets? And I led so many different webinars for them. And now that I look back at that journey, I don't think it was one thing. I think it really was a mix of everything. Having a team that's motivated and driven, and that can be the right brand ambassador for your brand. So it comes back to your people skills, because at the end of the day, even though you own these locations, the customer is coming in and seeing that one STEM teacher or that drone teacher, and that's their customer experience. So, like you mentioned, you've gone to these programs, you've done jujitsu. If you're it doesn't matter who owns that jujitsu studio, but if you had a great experience with that teacher, you're going to go back. You're going to write a review for for that place. You're going to go on Facebook, tell your friends about it because you've had such a great customer experience there. Um, so there's so many multifaceted layers to this, David, that it goes pretty deep. But I do think from our side as franchisor, the one thing that I focus on is motivating our franchisees, and we do this through webinars that we host on a monthly basis. We also have a town hall session that we do with them on a quarterly basis. And we have little awards that keep going between the little franchisees so that they get to compete amongst each other on best customer service or highest revenue performance, and things like that that can motivate and elevate everyone to the next level.
You mentioned customer experience several times. You talked about providing the tools and the enablement, the webinars and town halls, etc. But from a systemization standpoint and being able to get a good picture of the landscape of the franchisees and the end customers, Do you have a methodology or even secret sauce on how to keep a pulse on that experience for the entire ecosystem? What does that look like, from a management perspective?
At one point in this conversation, I mentioned I feel like I'm pivoting myself from education to tech, and maybe this also brings us to the COVID pandemic that we've all been dealing with this year. We had a tech platform that we were working on last year, which would help our franchisees administer their classes. They wouldn't have to print lesson plans; everything would be automated. And then that also had an arm of customer experience where you could do surveys and get feedback. And when the pandemic locked us down in March, we really went back and spent more time developing that platform. So it's a proprietary platform that we rolled out in 2020. And I will say that that tool has really helped in keeping up with our customers' experience and making sure that our customers are having a great time when they go to any of our center, be it Bakersfield, California, or Bel Air, Central Houston, Texas. So consistency, I think, is what is key in franchising. We've all heard this. A franchise brand like a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A will try to have the same burger that you go and have at any of their locations. And that is what we're a very small franchise at this stage, David, but that is something that we're really aiming towards. This is still a growth area for me for 2021, is how do I better getting feedback from our customers at the franchisor level.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the pivots inside of COVID, which is the elephants in the room here, and so it blindsided everyone. Let's talk about that pivot and what this year has looked like for you in terms of having to make the changes with social distancing and sanitation and shifting to video. I know that's a lot, but I know that's also been something you've been really focused on this year. So talk to us about how COVID has changed your business and how you think you can thrive despite a global pandemic.
COVID has thrown us all business owners, and into the storm that we're all trying to survive and come out of ahead, hopefully in 2021. But when COVID first hit on March 13th, and we all had lockdown orders in most states, the first thing that we thought of was how do we still stay top of mind for our customers, right? They're home, there's no school. Schools were thrown into this frenzy of we don't know when we're going to open, if it's going to be virtual, in person. So what we did was we took our lessons, science experiments, building a robot out of boxes, easy things that we someone could do at home, and we posted them on our social media pages. We did a Facebook Live. We started doing a couple newsletters. And a funny story there, David, is in our little world, these videos went viral for us. We had up to 5,000 views on some of these DIY projects that someone could do at home with their child. And we were hearing more and more from our end customer that give us more of these. We're stuck at home, and this is giving us a great project to do with our child since there was no school or anything going on at that time. And that's what made us start working on going beyond our four walls of our facility and building out these lessons. So we're still working on these videos, and that's a big project that's been a focus for me this year, is converting our 5,000 hours of curriculum into self-paced learning videos that could be implemented and taught at any facility, be it a YMCA, an after school provider. And the reason we're looking at that space is with or without COVID, these facilities are not wanting any outside providers to come into their facilities. In the past, traditionally pre COVID years, they would come to us and say, bring your teachers in, come teach our children. And now, even though they are open, they have all sorts of other restrictions to deal with. So that has been one big pivot, and what makes me feel like we're turning into more of a SaaS based company.
Mhm.
2021 will show us more of where that goes for us as a program because we have the content. We're just working towards delivering it in the right format. So our Idea Lab offices have turned into Idea Lab studios, where we're doing all the filming, and we have talent or actors there for these videos to teach these classes, which they used to be our prior teachers.
Hmm.
And then our second
Like
biggest
this is not on my job description.
so true.
That's funny.
And then one interesting pivot that I'll share with you also was we were looking for an investor. Our journey was we started franchising in 2017. We've been around since 2011. We ran and operated a couple of our own stores. And then we were inundated with requests to franchise this concept. And that started us on this legal journey in 2016 of franchise disclosure documents and setting up our ops manual, which I won't bore you with all the details. But in 2017, when we started our first franchise in Austin, Texas, since from that day to today, we've grown fairly quickly, and it's been some organic growth. We've sold about close to 100 locations, and we have about 20 of them operating right now. So that made us look for an investor for to sustain our cash needs and bring somebody else in for the next stage of growth. And the moment the pandemic hit, David, I honestly thought to myself, there's no way that we're going to find an investor during COVID. There's a couple potentials we were talking to. Some of them said, oh, well, I'm going to wait and see how Idea Lab does. How does brick and mortar survive this pandemic? But I'm happy to say that in July, we did bring a majority investor in from California. And, that was a lot of hard work and a lot of due diligence that went into it. And hopefully it was the right move for the company.
So congratulations on the majority investor. That is
Yeah,
impressive.
thank you, David.
Wow. Yeah. I skipped past a question I wanted to ask earlier as we were talking about in customer experience management and the operations. As you said, you encourage sort of a healthy competition between the various
Hmm.
franchisees. So I'm curious, when you gauge performance, is it solely inside of Idea Labs and the betwixt the franchisees, or do you also use other, whether it's a competitor or other similar type of franchises in industry or adjacent industries to help to gauge the performance of the franchise?
So, for most of our key performance indicators for our franchisees, they're mostly internal looking, where they compare themselves to each other. But they do look at industry averages. So, really, there are industry averages in the education space. And that is something that we always look at to see, what is the percent open rate for these centers? How can we make them come online faster? There is a time lag there because of the fact that you have to sign a lease, find the right location, do a build out. And of course, given the year that we've had this year, there have been delays, especially on the lease side for sure. So I will say, yes, we do look at key performance indicators outside of just the franchise system and what's the industry average in the norm. We do look at competitors, but we are still in, I would feel, on the younger side in terms of a franchise, because we've grown so quickly that we're still trying to find our own 2 feet and figure out who do we exactly compare ourselves to.
I appreciate all the plates that are spinning in the air, you know? So, oh, that's great. Well, maybe one or two topics and we'll wind down here. Of course, the experience at Rice itself and sort of looking at your path forward. What are some of the takeaways from your experience when you were full time at Rice for the 2 years, some of the things that you gleaned that you were able to use going forward after graduation that perhaps you may want to call out to any prospective or current students to potentially utilize if they wanted to follow a similar career trajectory or otherwise.
I mean, I can't say enough about my Rice experience. It truly has opened up so many different opportunities for me personally. Um, just the Rice community in itself, I think one of the key takeaways for me from Rice was people had mentioned that to me, that the Rice community is very strong and you're lucky to have gotten in. I don't think I had enough regard for that until I really have gone through that experience myself. And I think you mentioned this earlier, David, that in my it's been a while since I did my MBA class of '06, but I will tell you, till date, I'm still using those contacts and connections. One of our advisors for our company for Idea Lab is Craig Cianti, and he is a Rice alum. He's taught classes at Rice University. He's also the founder of Pinot's Palette. I tapped into him a year and a half ago when my franchising journey began, and one thing led to another, and now we talk on a weekly basis. He's a great coach and mentor, and also an advisor for us for the firm. So that would be my big advice to anyone who's at Rice. Even when you graduate 10, 15 years down the road, you pick up the phone or you send an email to somebody who you've been at Rice with, regardless of what class, what year, EMBA, full time, they're going to respond to you. At least you'll get their year the first time round. So definitely, that is a sacred part of Rice, and it keeps us all together.
That's really well said. That seems to be a recurring motif in these conversations and as I connect with alumni. So the path forward here from you, I mean, we talked about the pivot, and of course, you're working with your new majority investor. Your kids are growing and teaching you how to do podcasting and and coding, apparently, and flying drones. What just generally speaking, moving forward, for Idea Lab and for yourself, what are your major efforts and focus areas as we go? And certainly acknowledging the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknown unknowns. But as you plod forward, what are your focus areas and what does success look like for you?
Oh my gosh, that's a, a big question that you asked. Um, so, path forward, I think for us is trying to reach as many children as we can through our program. And hopefully, these self paced classes that we're developing and our technology that we have that's being rolled out in January, it's we have a beta version of the platform being rolled out in January. Hopefully, that is something that takes off for us. But you asked, what does success look like? I think that would be a big success metric for me personally. The brick and mortar and the operation of our stores and surviving the pandemic and coming out ahead post pandemic or post vaccine, when people talk about things returning to normal. I think that's a given. But the technology part is something that's new for us, and the reason I'm so passionate about it too is it helps us go beyond our four walls, like I mentioned before. And it doesn't limit us to just the 40, 50 kids that we could see at our centers in these states that we're in. It really makes you a global program. We have a franchise area developer in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. And they've been beyond excited about this new technology that's being rolled out next year, because that makes them feel like they can, offer these classes in the UAE and Dubai. So that's really a big focus for me in 2021. And of course, hoping that our brick and mortar stores survive the pandemic.
Well, Davina, I've really appreciated this, and as always, I always have to say I could go on for hours and hours with you, and I know we have follow-on conversations betwixt us going forward. So, for folks that want to learn more about Idea Lab Kids, or how to better support you, or learn more about the program, or maybe even consider investing, how would you like folks to get in touch with either yourself for the franchise, or your ecosystem?
Yeah, they can definitely reach out to me. I'm available on email. My email is my first name, Devina, Devina, at idealabkids.com, and kids with an S. And then definitely visit us on our website at idealabkids.com. We have presence in about 8 states in the US currently, hopefully trying to open more. So if you're ever interested in franchising or investing, or even just taking a class for your child, would we would love to have you.
Well, Davina, it's been such a pleasure. So, in the spirit of "I'll have you know," are there any other maybe nuggets that you haven't shared or would like to share with the broader team before we adjourn here that maybe folks don't either know about you or something maybe hot off the press, or otherwise. Yeah.
I think we spent a lot of time, David, talking about pivoting to entrepreneurship. I think in my journey, I've met a lot of people who've asked me about that leap of faith that I took when I left my Transocean job and pivoted to this small business ownership space. It it was a big leap. It's what I will say is it may or may not be for you. Definitely talk to more people if that's something you're thinking about. You touched on this earlier where you could do, these days you could do a side gig, try it out as a side gig. If that works, then go ahead and take the full jump or leap ahead. But definitely it's been an awesome journey and continues to be so. And, I hope that anyone listening to this, if you get inspired, then feel free to reach out if you have any more questions. I will say, David, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure, and you're a great host. So I'm excited to have this rolled out to all the listeners out there.
Absolutely. And for the folks listening, please help us out with a share and push this out to your ecosystem, whether it's Rice alumni or students or otherwise, or business leaders out there. Appreciate that in advance. Devina, it's been a pleasure as well. Likewise, thank you for the sentiment. And folks listening, thank you for tuning in to I'll Have You Know. Take care and have a good one.
Thank you, David.
This has been I'll Have You Know. Thanks for listening. You can find links and more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts and leave us a comment while you're at it and let us know what you think. I'll Have You Know is a production of Rice Business and is sponsored by the Rice Business Alumni Board. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Christine Dobbin, and David Druglever.